Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Church Next. We are so excited today about our new series, Wonder Women, Women on Mission. And we're talking about women who are making waves, you guys. And we've got some pretty awesome guests coming through on this series. But today we are kicking off with none other than the Reverend Lakesha Womack.
Hey.
Glad to have you here. And of course, we've got the crew in full effect. Miss Jade Richards. Hey, girl. And our bro who wanted to kind of sit out, but we made him come anyway.
That made me feel like I belong. Thank you.
We needed the testosterone on here. So we got Pastor Myron Pierce in the building, and we are just totally excited about this conversation. And so just to get into a little bit about Lakesha, she's a consultant, a deacon, a scholar. She was ordained as a deacon from the Alabama, Florida Episcopal District in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And I'm not going to get too far into her story because we want her to talk about her journey, but she is definitely someone that you want to pay attention to. She's always bringing up topics about social justice and things like that. And we're going to talk about her efforts as we go into this interview. So Jade, I'm going to kick it off to you to start us off.
Hey, and before you do, I do want the audience to know that Lakesha has a brand new book out. It's all about her bio. So just read the book. It's coming out. It's kind of a joke. Nobody's laughing, but go ahead, Jade.
So thank you, Jennifer. That was and you gave us a rundown of some of the amazing things that Lakesha does and is. But the inquisitive side of me always likes to hear it from the person themselves. So Lakesha, we'll kick off by just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me on this show. It is an honor to be considered a Wonder Woman, like in this environment, because there are so many women doing so many incredible things. But I am an ordained deacon in the AME Zion Church. I am not one of those people who grew up in the church, did youth church and all of that stuff. When I graduated from high school, I was out living my best life. I was not thinking about the church. And I know Jennifer can appreciate this from a marketing perspective. I think what makes what I do different from other people is I understand what people outside the church are saying about people inside the church. So that's kind of how Rethinking Church was established, because I really challenge church leaders to think about church not from the lens that they've always looked at it, but what about the people who are outside who don't get this church language and this church lingo and all the programs and teas and all that stuff that you guys are trying to do? Like, that means nothing to most people. So how do we rethink church to include people who are not churched, as we would like to call them? So excited to share more about the work with you all today.
That's amazing. So you did say that you didn't grow up in church. That's just like me. I came to Christ at 17 years old. So how about sharing with us your testimony? How did you eventually come to Christ in the first place?
Most definitely. So I did grow up in the church. So my mom is very involved in the church. I'm a third generation Zionite. However, I wasn't in the church. So I was going to church, but I wasn't in the church. And when I went to college, my mom would always call and she's like, "Did you go to church on Sunday?" And I'm like, "Nah, leave me alone. I'm at brunch. I'm, probably hung over on Sunday morning. I'm not thinking about church." But as I got into my 20s and life just, really started to come at me, and I realized there wasn't anyone I could really talk to. And that's when my relationship with God started. So there's a difference between being in the church and having a relationship with God. And so that's when I really started talking to God and listening to God for advice. And I became a mom by choice at 27, 28, and I moved back home with my mom and started going to church with her. And at that time, I was just going to church for the food. We lived in a small town, Southern Alabama. I knew we were going to an afternoon service and there was going to be some fried chicken and somebody's grandma was baking a pound cake. I was there for the food. But as I got involved, I saw that there weren't a lot of young adults involved. And so I started asking, well, what is it that's missing? Why aren't there more young adults? And so that's when I started to get involved in the actual business and leadership of the church. And then my pastor at the time was like, hey, you know, I want you to come and deliver, you know, a message at the church. And I was like, yo, you don't know me like that. Like, I don't do that. Like, that's not what I do. And I remember pacing in my mom's living room, and I was like, all right, God, like, I just need like an ounce of the Holy Spirit. Like, I don't want to be up there shouting or nothing, but just so that I know that this is real. And I tell people all the time, like, that prayer, like that one moment, like, changed everything for me, because like, you only need an ounce. And I've been sold out ever since, and on this mission to just do whatever God has for me to do.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
That's powerful. That's powerful. when you as you mentioned him coming and saying, hey, will you speak? Like, how'd you navigate that?
So it was interesting because, you know, I was praying for a message. And at that time, I was the regional chairperson of our young adult ministry. So I was kind of used to speaking in churches and doing presentations, but speaking from the pulpit, like that was my first time, like being in the pulpit and speaking. And so that's why, like, I just wanted to be sure, because even not being a pastor or being in that role, I recognize like the amount of like spiritual abuse that can happen from the pulpit when people are standing up and they're saying things that they say are from God, but they're really like their interpretations or their opinions about how people should be living. And so I just wanted to be sure. And he preached, so it was an afternoon service, and he preached that morning, and he was talking about, he was like, you know, some people think when they preach their trial sermon is this big occasion, but it's really the first time they stand up and declare a word from God. And I was like, he is not talking about me. Like, I am not a like, is he really up there talking about me? I was like, that's not me. But yeah, so maybe a year later, I went to a church, and the lady was like, well, since you're not a preacher, then you're going to speak from the floor. And I remember standing up at the little podium, right? And I was standing and I was like, yo, this isn't where I'm supposed to be, because I had been in the pulpit so many times. And I was like, oh my God, like, maybe I am a preacher, maybe I am. And that's when I really started to start to consider more seriously, like, maybe this is what I'm called to do.
Wow.
That's powerful. You know, it's one of the main reasons why we wanted to have this conversation, because I feel like there are so many women that are making waves, and like the reality in Black women, people of color. And what we want to do here is we want to create environments where, regardless of who you are, what you look like, what your ethnic background is, what your gender is, we want to be able to have a place for it. And so we have people who are listening in and watching, and will be catching the replay. And I'm sure you'll hit on this. In fact, I'd like you to hit on it now. Talk to us a little bit about your efforts and what you're currently doing in ministry and life and business.
Woo, we're doing all the things over here. So with Rethinking Church, you know, last year we were funded by Facebook to become a sustainable organization. And just to give you a little background on the organization, in 2016, I did a presentation for the World Methodist Conference, I think. And it was on using social media for global evangelism and outreach. And I realized that for the first time in the history of civilization, we could use social media to fulfill the Great Commission, to reach all nations. We didn't have to travel across the world. And so, armed with that information, I was excited to go into churches and say, like, hey, like, this social media thing, 2016, people are like, nah, Facebook is the devil and we don't need a website. I was like, oh, okay. But, you know, looking at like mega ministries like TD Jakes, Joel Osteen, and how like people were gravitating toward their ministry, it's like there's obviously like something here that we're missing. And so I started doing seminars and, you know, talking to people about, we need to rethink how we're doing this engagement. We need to rethink how we're using these tools, because there's a group of people who are really attracted to this social media thing, who are really into this digital media. And they were just like, nah. And then of course the pandemic hit and everybody's like, yo, so how do we do that Facebook? Like, how do we get a website? And I was like, oh, so now everybody's on board, right? So now y'all have the questions. So that's where Rethinking Church, we started to build an online community. and saw it as an opportunity just to kind of push the envelope a little bit. So, we ask questions and allow people to share from their experiences. And what my goal is that as people are reading other people's responses, that it'll open their eyes to some things, because I've grown through the group. There's some things that I just thought that we all agreed on that was like settled law in the church, and people come and they give their perspective, and it's like, wow, like I never thought about it like that before. And so that's how our community has grown, just with people who are interested in dialoguing and growing with each other. So we have a couple of web series that are going now. We have Rethinking Black Wealth. We have Business Dollars and Cents. We have a Courageous Conversations podcast, an Intro to Spiritual Care. We had an economic empowerment think tank that grew out of our 2020 summit, and they're working on some projects. We have a women in ministry leadership group that's leading a church technology and innovation group that is forming. And so we're just looking at all the intersections of like kind of the secular world and are some of the areas where it's going to impact the church. And then how do we start to become in the forefront of those issues? Because a lot of times the Black church is playing catch up. So how do we become drivers in these conversations? How do we start looking to the future to see where the church is going, and then start to build capacity so that we can be there and help pull churches along?
The thing that go ahead. I'm about to just like double dutch, girl. You better jump in. Girl. Jump in. I'm coming, girl. Do your thing, Jay. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question before Jennifer asked hers. So you mentioned like so much stuff that you've got going on. You got all of these plates spinning. Are you also a mother?
Yes, I am. I'm a mom by choice. So I have a 16-year-old son who, keeps me close to God.
Yeah. So how do you, as a woman on mission, Wonder Woman, we've got all these plates spinning. How do you find balance in that? How do you manage with the work-life balance and stuff like that? What advice do you have for women that have all these plates spinning?
Yeah, so one thing, like I'm extremely planned. So I plan my weeks. Like I plan pretty much everything. Like I plan what I'm going to wear every day. Like on Sundays, I sit down, I have a meal plan for the week. I know what I'm going to wear every day, like based on my calendar. Like I know what I need to do every day. I know how much money I'm spending every day. So like when I wake up in the morning, like I know what my day looks like. And I tell people, like, you make time for what's important. So like this week, I'm actually on vacation. My birthday was last week. I'm on vacation. But I knew that I wanted to do this. And so, my family understands that, there's a balance. And so this morning we went and played putt-putt. We just went and had lunch. And then they knew like I needed to be home because I wanted to be a part of this experience. And then later today, we're going to go and do something. So it's just about like understanding what your priorities are, like knowing what your day looks like. Like you don't have to, even when you're on vacation, if you have to take a meeting, because a lot of us can't just walk away for a week. Like people are like, oh, self-care, like walk away. Like if I walk away for a week, like I'm going to have more work when I come back that the vacation won't even be worth it. But in the mornings, like I might get up and do like 2 or 3 things just to catch up on email, make sure that I'm on top of things. And then I spend the rest of the day with my family, or I might do it at the end of the day. But it's just about prioritizing your life. I make sure that I make time for my son. Like, we might have date night, or, we'll say like, Tuesday nights that we're going to have game night. Like I plan for that. I make sure I don't have any Zooms, and that I'm making space for him and for my girlfriends. Like you have to make time for the things that are important to you, and not let life just happen to you, but be intentional about how you're living. But I do want to say, like, don't look at my life and think like, oh, she's got it together, because there's a million things that fall through the cracks. Like I get it wrong a lot. And sometimes like you just have to admit, like there's, something that's coming up that this is not going to work. And, this weekend, I'm going to have to address that, because it just didn't come together the way that I hoped that it did. And, some people will be disappointed, and that's a part of life. Like I'm doing the best that I can. And sometimes it works, and it works really well. And that's what people see. But sometimes like it doesn't work, and you just have to eat the humble pie, admit it, and then keep moving.
I think that's so important that you said that, because I think especially in like a social media era where everybody, you know, uploading their highlight reels. You know, from the outside looking in, a lot of the time it can look like all of these Wonder Women are always wonderful, you know, sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? But when you talk about your work-life balance, you spoke a lot about including other people and the stuff that you have to do for other people. How do you find time to just have time for yourself? Because I read something recently that said, especially women, a lot of our self-care is not actually self-care. It's after we're already depleted, and it's like self-repair more than like preserving ourselves. So how do you take time alone and for yourself, and what does that look like in terms of getting time with God as well?
Yeah, so, you know, one thing, I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I've been insulin dependent for almost 17 years. And so I have to listen to my body. So if my body's like, sis, we're tired, then in my office at home, like there's a pillow and blanket on the floor, and I have a TV. And if I feel like I don't want to work anymore, like I lay down on the floor and I might like just veg out on like Criminal Minds or Law and Order. And then there are some days where it's just like, yo, like I don't feel like doing it. So I look at like what has to be done today, and I get those things done, and I might be on my sofa for the rest of the day. So I think that the important thing is like listening to your body, because when you're tired, like you don't make decisions as well, you're not as functional. Also exercise, like I know, like I hate going to the gym, so I invested. You have to invest in yourself. I invested in a Peloton so that I can work out in the mornings at home. Like I just think about like what's gonna work for me. Also, like not eating like heavy foods. Like heavy foods will make you tired. So during the day, like, you know, I might eat a salad or a sandwich so that it gives me the energy to keep going. So those are ways that I take care of myself, is just being intentional about, you know, not only how I spend my time with work, but how I spend my time for myself. And some days it's like, yo, like I'm going to get my nails done today and I'm not doing anything else. I might go walk around the mall and just look like, you know, and I think that's one of the advantages to being like your own boss, is that you can make your schedule. Like you still got to get the work done, but figuring out like what has to get done. And then if I need some time, how do I take that time for myself?
You know, one of the things that I'm a super fan. You know, my wife just went back to work after 10 years. She's enrolled in nursing school. And so I'm taking on and assuming a lot of the responsibilities that she has for the last 10 years.
Wow.
Just to hear you say that is refreshing, because I think as a man, sometimes it's easy to look at what a woman does and see it as insignificant, because maybe she's in the home, or she runs a small business out of our home as well. And so I'm more honored and thankful for women. And secondly, you said that you have type 1 diabetes. Well, my son was diagnosed with type 1 at the age of 3, and he's now 11. And so I want our audience to know, I didn't set this up like this, but to have Lakesha here and to hear how, as a Black woman who loves Jesus and has all of these responsibilities, and yet she's maximizing her time so that the kingdom of God can advance. It's the reason why we have this show. Like we really want to hear from leaders who, it's not all glitz and glamour. It's not all for the next generation that's maybe watching. Maybe you may see someone who's successful, and you're like, man, I want that life, but do you really? And do you know what it costs? Because as you speak from a place of having diabetes, I know what that's like, you know, at some level, not fully, but to see the struggle along the way. And I just want to thank you for not quitting and not giving up, because it's people in all of those lanes that you've experienced life that's looking up to you. I don't know, 50,000 people that have subscribed to our email leadership network, to be able to hear from a woman is beautiful. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Jennifer, we just took over there.
Sorry, Jen.
Listen,
kicking it. Hey.
I have been sitting back and just letting you guys get to know Lakesha because I already know she's wonderful.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you guys a chance to interact, and what's come out so far has just been great. I think Lakesha, we got connected through Clubhouse.
I think so. Yeah. Because I reached out to you to be a part of one of our events because I heard you speak and I was like, oh yeah. Because I believe in like shooting my shot. So it's like, yo, I want this person, and like the only thing you can do is either say yes or say no. So it's like, hey, shoot your shot.
Right. And literally that shooting her shot led to me being part of her summit. I think it was like last year sometime.
Yeah.
And then also too the Rethinking Church book. That spent a couple of weeks on the Amazon bestseller list in 2 categories.
Yeah.
Not just 1, 2. Actually, we was in the top. I was like, okay, look at us.
Wow.
And so,
and I just want to say something about that. Like, you know, a lot of people don't recognize the power of community. And because I think we had about 30 people in the book and everybody was sharing it and encouraging their network to buy the book, that's what helped us to reach like that Amazon bestseller. Because a lot of times when you publish a book by yourself, it is harder because you only have your network. But by bringing so many people together and everybody being a part of it. And I was just at an event last week where somebody actually pulled the book up on their phone and said that they had been using it with their church to show them like different strategies. So it's like, it's not just about putting out the content, but putting out content that people are actually using. So, yeah.
You know, and we've said this on the show plenty of times, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, you know, take people along with you. And that's what we did. We came together, all of us authors. I mean, Lakesha had it down to a science. She was like, listen, this is the deadline. What are you writing about? She had to fill out this little form. I said, oh, she got it together. So, you know, we knew how many words to write and we submitted it. And it's like, I literally cried because what she doesn't know is this is the last thing I was able to share with my dad before he passed.
I remember that. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, for me, this book has so much meaning. This is my first co-author experience. This is my first book experience. And I'm just like, I'm just grateful. So, you know, Lakesha is definitely top 10 in my book.
You're definitely in my top 10 too. So we fangirl together.
So I had to have her on this series because I've just been watching everything that she's doing. And I'm like, you know, she really embodies that term Wonder Woman. And she does it with such grace and just with such diversity. There are people from all walks of life, different colors, different denominations that follow her, that listen to her voice, respect her voice. And so it was an honor to, you know, be able to pull her in on this show. And so, Lakesha, I got a couple questions for you. First one, what's the number one thing God is teaching you right now?
God is teaching me the importance of a team. So, you know, even though like we did that collaboration project, it was pretty much me that was leading it. But as I receive new visions of projects that we want to do in the future, I recognize the importance of having like an actual team working with me. And so if you guys can't tell, I'm a little bit of an alpha female. So, you know, I like to be in charge. I like to be the boss. However, it is important to have people around you that can help. And so that's one of the things that I'm learning in this season is how to have people around me and trust their voice and trust their vision to be a part of the vision that I have. And even if it doesn't go the way I would do it, because, you know, I have my own ideas of how things can go, like, you know, did anybody die? Like that's become like my measure. Did anybody die? If nobody died, like it's okay. The only thing we can't do is bring people back from the dead. We don't have those powers, but like anything else, like, you know, we can fix it. We can get past it. So yeah, that's right.
You know, that's a t-shirt right there. Did anybody die?
Right.
Did anybody die?
Exactly. If nobody died, like, hey, like we can get past it.
Right. We can live and make it another day. And so with that mentality, and I think that's so important because especially when you're an entrepreneur and you have such an operation on your shoulders, it's easy to, you know, and I'm an alpha female too, You know, it's easy to be like, listen, we gonna debo this thing. You gonna do it my way, or it's the highway. And for you to rely on your community and to actually say, you know what, I don't know it all, but I know where I want to go. Let's find a common ground. Let's find some compromise so we can get the work done. It's just a beautiful thing. And it's funny because I think this is kind of a reoccurring theme on this show, Myron, where we have leaders come on and they're all saying, I trust my community. I trust the people that are around me. And so for those of you that are watching, we definitely want you guys to ask questions in the chat. But if you're listening, you're a senior pastor or you're running an operation, you're an entrepreneur, take time to trust your community. Pull the people in around you and ask them their opinion. Ask them about their piece of the vision, because obviously if God has staffed you with people, he's given them keys for your vision to go forward and to reach the world. So another question I want to pose to you is something a little different. What do you wish that you know? What do you know now that you wish that you knew younger?
I would say that I can do anything. I think that especially as like a Black person, like a lot of times we are encouraged to think small, to kind of do what you can do with your own hands. And as I look around at people who are uber successful, the only difference between them and us is that they dream big. And they put in the work every day to get to those dreams. And I think that, you know, if I knew when I was younger that I could do anything that I wanted to do, I think I would have dreamed a lot bigger and not just kind of settled for what was in front of me. And it wasn't until I surrendered to God, probably about 11 years ago. And I was just like, all right, God, like whatever you want me to do, like, that's what I'm going to do. And that's when, you know, writing for Forbes, like I never imagined that I would be writing for Forbes. I never imagined I would be writing for Newsweek. I never imagined I would have 19 books and that I would be on the stages that I've been on. But it's just like, I trust God. And it's just like, yo, like I can do anything. Like there's nothing that someone puts in front of me that I question myself, I second guess myself about. It's like, I might have to do some research to figure out how I'm going to get it done. But there's nothing that I don't believe that I can accomplish. And, you know, in some instances that might, you know, people think that that's arrogance or whatever, but it's like, nah, like I have the confidence in myself and in the God who made me that I can do all things. So I'm going to try. Like what it looks like when it gets done, like we gonna see, but I'm at least gonna try it.
Yeah, and that's an amazing attitude to have. And I think one of the reasons why people don't try things or they don't dream big is because of the fear of failure. So let's talk about failure for a little bit. How do you, in your life, how do you perceive failure? And when it comes up, and if it comes up, how is a good way to deal with it from what you've learned in your life?
I don't perceive failure because I believe there's a lesson in everything. So even when I have those valley moments, like I'm always asking God, like, what are you trying to teach me? Like, what do I need to learn in this place? And I don't believe that life is filled with just mountaintop experiences. Like we all have to go through the valley. Like you always are going to go through some things that are just not going to work, but you have to ask, like, what is it that I'm learning in this season? And most of the times when I have those valley moments, like that's another service that I'm adding to my consulting firm. Because it's like, yo, I just learned something new. And to keep someone else from going through this, you can pay me and I will show you not to have, you know, that same experience. So, you know, it's all about how you look at it. Like if you look at life and you're always thinking about like what's wrong and what's not going right, then you're always going to be in the valley. But if you look at life and say, hey, like this didn't work out, but what did I learn from it? How can I teach other people not to have this same experience? Then you become a solution-oriented person. And I believe that's one of the reasons people invite me into spaces, because of my outlook, because I'm always looking at how do we get past this challenge? How do we look for solutions? And people want that. People, they know what the problems are, but they want to know who wants to come into the room and help us come up with some solutions to the challenges that we're facing.
Wow. You know, I think when we look at coming out of COVID, when we look at the climate of politics in America, when we look at the issues of race, when you talk about outlook, I think that's one of the skills as leaders, pastors, ministry leaders that we have to, because it's so easy, as you've alluded to have this pessimistic view on life because of everything going around us, and we can get jaded. You know what I'm saying? I'll be the first one to say that I'm always having to check my I was gonna say my Jade meter, but no pun intended. My Jadeness. And so like I appreciate that. And one of the things that just strikes me about you, with all the things that you're doing, is your knack for learning. You just said it. If I don't know it, I'll go and figure out a way to get paid for it. And I think that's a parallel for even church ministry. It's like, whatever we don't know, whatever problems we're having, how are we equipping our congregations, the people that we're discipling and mentoring, to develop this sense of outlook? You probably should write a book on having something, the whole perspective and outlook. And because one of the things that I thought about the outlook I had when I was in the penitentiary with a 16 to 33 year sentence, it was this, that I'm a pastor waiting on my congregation.
Yeah.
I'm a free man waiting to be released.
Yeah.
Right. And that was just all central to the way that I saw life. And I think as you're speaking here, someone with outlook like that says a lot about your tenacity to learn. And so I want to ask you this question: what is it that you're learning, whether it's from an influencer, a speaker, a pastor, a leader, or maybe even a book? What are you learning that you would say, hey, Myron, hey, this is valuable for our audience, and I think that they need to get this one?
So I think one thing that I'm learning, that's a continuous journey, is, what does it truly mean to live liberated? So I think that, when we consider liberation theology, it kind of centers around like our freedom in Christ. But then when we look at how we live in society, most of us are enslaved. Most of us are economic slaves. Most of us are in abusive relationships with our churches. Most of us are in oppressive situations. And so it's like, you can say that you're living liberated in Christ, but then when you look at your circumstances, are you free? Like, can you wake up and like stretch your arms and not feel encumbered by pressures in society? And for most people, like, they can't say that because there are things that are holding them back and holding them down. And so what I'm learning is like, what does it truly mean to live free? How do I walk a holy boldness? There are some situations within our denomination that I'm sure they would prefer that I not speak on, but it's like, if I'm truly living free, then how is it that I allow a Pharaoh to hold my people captive because of the systems that they have created that are not allowing them to live free? And now that I have freed myself from the mentality that you all have created that is oppressing people, how then do I help other people to live free? And so really just starting to understand, like, when you have that freedom in your mind, that you can do anything, that you are not encumbered, because the God who created you was a creator and you are made in God's image. So you too are a creator. So you can create the life that you want to live. Just like you were talking about with manifesting, that's what manifesting is.
Can I just have a praise break? I just want a praise break. I just want a hallelujah. Like, I just want something. Girl, can I cash up you a tithe or something? Praise God, man. Go ahead, my bad.
Right, but it's in your mind. When you've been liberated in your mind, and you believe that there are no limitations and that there's nothing anyone can say or that can do that can oppress me anymore, and that I am not afraid to speak out against those systems. What does it truly look like? What does it look like to serve God when you are truly liberated? What does it look like when you are intent upon setting the captives free, right? When we are out truly preaching the good news to people, that it's not about the stuff that you have. It's not about where you live or the car that you drive or the house that you live in. Like when you think about, like, there's some homeless people that you might drop $1 to and they will say a prayer to you. They will say a prayer for you. Whereas there are some people who have massive amounts of fortune and don't even think about praying for you. So what does it mean? Like, we think that those people are beneath us, but a lot of times, like, they're living free because in their mind, they're not constructed into this whole society that we've created of what does wealth look like and what does having look like. Like, they're content with just being. And so what does it look like for us to move from this doing and, you know, being a part of these systems to just being free to be, and then wanting to liberate others? So I know that was kind of like long and convoluted, but those are like the things that's kind of going through my mind right now, you know, as God is working with me. Like, what does it mean to truly like set our people free?
Wow.
You know, someone once said, you know, we're so focused on being humans doing that we forget to be human beings.
Yeah.
And that just spoke to me specifically, because I'm in church leadership and there's a rat race that you find yourself in constantly. And you're just like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that. And you never take time to just be. And a lot of times, especially in denominations, you end up losing your identity in the denomination. And then when things fall apart, you're like, who am I? Like going through a divorce. You know, when you're in a marriage so long, you become one with that person. And after, you're like, wait a minute, who am I? And you're trying to go back 16, 20, 25 years to figure out, like, okay, who was I when I started and how do I reconnect with that person? So what I go through is this constant battle, and there's this unseen force of constraining that happens, especially with women in ministry. You got to fit this mode. you can't look like this. You can't talk like that. You got to, you know, go in this line, and you have to obey this patriarchal system that has been in place for the last 200 years.
Wow.
Yeah, see, you know, so 2019, I was running for a general office in my denomination, and someone was like, you know, so when are you going to start, you know, dressing like, you know, the women, I guess, like they should. And in that moment, like, I had a decision to make, like, you know, do I want to conform to their image of what I should look like, or do I want to be true to myself? And I said to myself, if I lose this race, I would rather lose being the person that I am than to win being the person that they want me to be. And so it's like, I show up in space and I'm like, yo, like, if y'all don't like it, like, I'm sorry. Like, no, I'm not sorry. I don't care. Like, honestly. And it's not that I don't care about people, but it's like, I just got into a place where I'm less concerned about what people think about me than I am about how I feel about myself. And it's been really hard work to get to that place, because I was like so self-conscious and so insecure and always wondering, like, do I have on the right thing? What are people going to say? And how does my hair look? And how does my bed? And just like, and you can drive yourself crazy, like trying to look and be what other people want you to be. And you don't get to be who you're comfortable with. And so now it's like, I'm comfortable in my own skin. And yeah, like, y'all might think that, you know, me and all this body with those flat pants might be too much for you. But guess what? I feel good in it. And that's what I'm going to wear. And if you have a problem, like, check yourself. Like, check yourself if you look at me in a sexualized way and that's causing you problems, because I'm not going to own that. If I feel comfortable in whatever I have on and you're having issue, like, check your flesh, check your relationship with God, because I'm good over here.
Man, listen, I am so thankful for the Church Next show, because we're not going to filter anything. We want this to be a platform where, like, you don't have to conform in a show, and to be your authentic self. Like, you're bringing up so many things that people think about, but we don't necessarily talk about.
Right.
And what's liberating about this conversation, I want to repeat it for our audience. that I think is helpful. He said, I'd rather lose being the person that I am than to win being the person that they want me to be.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many, when you think about the church in the West, how many of our churches are losing because we're trying to be another church? How many pastors and leaders, how many of us are losing because we're trying to put on the shoes of another leader? You know what I mean? And that like really hit me right there, because that says you have to be a woman or a leader of conviction.
Yeah.
Which really is essential to liberation, essential to freedom. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And I don't think that, we really take like that self-inventory to figure out, who has God called me to be? What am I supposed to be doing? And that's where I find a lot of churches where, I have leaders come and they say, well, most of my congregation isn't doing anything and they don't want to work and they're not active. And it's like, yeah, but have you taken the time to identify like where God has called them to serve? What is God saying in their life? Because so often it's the leader's vision and then everybody else fall in line with that. But you're not taking into consideration that you have like this cosmos of people who all have different callings and who all have different gifts. And have you attempted to activate their gifts? Or are you just assuming that everyone should want to do what you want to do? And so there's a real work that goes into liberating your people. And when you do that, then you'll have like, if you have 50 members and you have 50 members and they're each walking in their calling and doing that little thing that God has called them to do. And that makes a massive ministry. But when you have only 5 people who are doing the thing that the pastor wants to do, then it's really hard to get that moving, because the other 45 people are like, oh, well, that's not my jam. So when y'all are ready to do some things I want to do, then I'll come off the bench. So you have all these people who are sitting on the bench because their gifts have not been activated.
Man. Wow. Do y'all mind if I ask another question? Okay, so
go ahead.
So I just want to ask, this y'all show, like, so think about it from a sports, like a basketball arena. Like, let's talk about the NBA finals. There are less people on the court than there are in the stands. And yet that's where the majority of us typically land, in the stands. And it's the same way in church. There's a lot of congregants in the stands who wish that they could play in the game, but the ones in power have it in such a way that only the elite get to play. So I'd like you to speak to a pastor, a ministry leader today, and give him or her some ways forward to move people from the stands to the court. What needs to happen to move people from the stands to the court?
Well, here's my philosophy on that, because I don't know if there's anything that I can say that can really change a pastor or a leader's heart about this work. But what I will say is it would be a shame for people to spend as much time as they do going to church, paying money, and doing all of these things, and to miss out on the fullness of life that God has for them, because we have limited their ability to serve. And at the end of the day, like, the thing that we're working for is that well done, my good and faithful servant. But you don't get a well done if you're not doing the thing that God has called you to do. And so what excuse do you give God? Like, when you get to God, when you get to the end of your life and you get to God and God says, I gave you a vision, I put a calling on your life, and you heard my voice, you knew this is what you were supposed to be doing, but you settled for doing what other people wanted you to do. What excuse do you give God? Do you say, I didn't have time, I didn't have the resource? God says, every day that breath was breathing in your body, you have the opportunity to do the thing that I called you to do. So I think that it's not incumbent upon the pastor or the leader, but it's for the person. It's for you. It's for you to do that self-reflection and say, am I in the place where I can serve, where I can be who God created me to be? And that doesn't mean that your church is a bad place or that your leader is a bad leader. But if you're not able to serve and to be who God called you to be in the space that you're in, then that's some work that you have to do. And you need to hear from God to say, God, show me where I'm supposed to serve. Show me what I'm supposed to do. And I pray that every day, God, show me who I'm supposed to help. Show me what what I'm supposed to do. Show me how I'm supposed to do this work. And every day I receive vision and I receive discernment from God about what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that too often we place our calling and that responsibility in the hands of another person. We give leaders too much power over our calling. It's not your leader's responsibility. It's not your pastor's responsibility for you to be who God called you to be. Because it wasn't a conference call. When people are like, God said to me, I was like, look, God got my number. If God has something to say to me, like I promise you, God will let me know. Like you might offer some confirmation, but if I didn't hear it from God first, there's nothing that you can tell me that God said about my life, that if God hasn't said me, it don't matter. Like you can give confirmation, but you cannot misdirect me and say, God says you should be over here, because God didn't say that to me. And we talk every day, all day.
Come on.
And that's the freedom we want. We want the congregation. When you talk about liberation, that's where the freedom at, because sometimes we handcuff ourselves to the beck and call of a pastor. Right. When we should be handcuffed to the king. And whatever the king is saying and my pastor ain't saying, then we have to think for ourselves. I'm not saying be a rebel or that's not the heart of this thing. But what we're saying is we done seen people drink Kool-Aid and die.
Right. And I just want to say that, we serve a God of order. So if God gives you a vision, and if you are in the place where you're supposed to be serving, it won't be chaos. You won't be rebelling. It's only rebellious if you are out of order. And if you're not in the place where you're supposed to be, that's where chaos ensues. But if you are serving where you're supposed to be serving and doing what God called you to do, then it works, it flows. But too often we're out of order. Either the leader's out of order, the people there's no order. And that's when it becomes chaotic. But when you pray to God, show me where I'm supposed to serve, show me what I'm supposed to do, then you have no problem submitting to your leader, because your leader's vision is in line with what God has called you to do.
Man.
Wow.
The piggyback, as we would say on Clubhouse, off of what you said, one thing that my spiritual father used to say often, Bishop Eddie Long used to tell us, many are called, few are chosen, but the ones who are chosen are the ones who show up. Yeah. And we don't often think about it like, wow, God's waiting for me to show up. And to your point, Lakesha, sometimes we're so afraid of moving around and interviewing ministries. You think about it, people interview you for a job to see if you're the right fit. Why do we not interview ministries to see if it's the right fit for us? Take time to actually sit, go visit. Don't be so quick to join. Ask the members, like, how long have you been here? What are you doing to serve? Do you feel the freedom to serve? And if their answers come back and you're like, this ain't for me, go check out someplace else. Be free to do that so that you can show up and be chosen to do what God has called you to do.
Yeah. And I like to use the analogy that, we're like seeds. And so your seed is looking for fertile ground that you can grow in, because that's how we become attached to the vine, right? And if we are not in a place where we can grow our seed, then what do we not do? Produce good fruit. And we are known by the fruit that we produce. And so a lot of times people are not having fruitful lives and fruitful ministries because they're not planted in fertile ground so that they can actually grow something. And so there are a lot of people whose seeds, their spirits are dying because they're not in fertile soil, and they're withering away, and they're empty, and they're always, just feeling so depleted. And it's like, because you're not in a place where you're growing and where you're feeling like you're being fulfilled. So think about yourself as a seed. Like, where is the soil that I want to be planted so that I can produce good fruit?
That is so good. That's so good. So I'm going to shift us a little bit because, we are in this quote unquote post-pandemic era. It just seems like it's another pandemic after another. But in this season, as we have seen hybrid church come about, and we're seeing ministry being done pretty much any and everywhere at this point. As a church leader, what do you think other church leaders should be thinking about during the season?
So I know this is going to be hard for some people to accept, but know your sheep. So what I see is a lot of shepherds who are trying to shepherd other people's sheep. And it's like, again, when you discern who God has called you to serve, like God hasn't called everybody to be on Facebook. And that's obvious by your background and your music and your lighting. Like God didn't call you to that. That's something that you want to do. But you know, when you know the people that God has called you to serve, focus on serving those people really well. So if your people are on conference call, have the best conference call that you can have. If your people are in space, have the best in person. If you're doing hybrid, whatever God has called you to. And I think that so often people want the social media fame, like they want the likes and the comments and the views, and all of that is artificial, because at the end of the day, like if people's lives aren't being impacted, then it doesn't matter how many likes and comments that you're getting, because people are just, you know, clicking a button. And a lot of times, like, they'll scroll through and they see your face and they hit like and they keep scrolling, like they're not even staying for the message. So really focus on, like, what is the impact that I can have? So if my impact is going to be online, if my impact is going to be in my community, in my congregation, really hear from God to figure out, where can I have an impact on people's lives? Because that's when the kingdom starts to grow, when we're having impact. But if we're just putting out content for the sake of putting out content, or to have our name on a flyer, then my question is like, what are you doing? Like,
wow,
what's the point?
Yeah, I know we have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you a final question, and Jade will follow up with another question. But as you think about the church and leaders in America and around the world, what opportunities do you think we should, as church leaders, be seizing as church leaders? What should we be grabbing a hold of in this season?
You know, it's really interesting. One of the things that I'm seeing is people are thirsting for knowledge right now. Like, people are looking to see like what other people are reading. Like, they want to be a part of book discussions. We have 2 book discussions that we do every week. Right now we're reading through the 1619 Project on Thursday evenings, and we're starting the Crossing the Lynching Tree with James Cone on Sundays. And people are anxious to share knowledge and to be a part of discussions. I think that the model where it was just putting content out and people absorbing it, people aren't really there anymore. They want to be a part of discussions. They want to talk about what they're thinking and what they're going through. And it would behoove some pastors to hear what some of your members are thinking, because you think that what you're preaching and what they're hearing is the same thing. But let me tell you, like, some of them, what you're saying and what they're getting is not the same thing. So before you send them out to evangelize, you might want to like get some feedback and hear like,
you're the truth. You're the truth, Ms. Womack.
Right. What was the message that you got on Sunday? Because that ain't really what I was trying to say. So I think that, you know, looking at like more opportunities for discussion and engagement, and to hear what people are thinking, and to ensure that we are all moving and speaking with a similar voice, because we're not all going to say the same thing, which is what allows us to reach so many different people. But the liberation message should be the same. Like, if you have people in your congregation that are going out like demonizing people or telling them that they're going to hell, I don't know if that's a good look for your church, because I don't know how many people are going to come based on that message. So you want to make sure that whatever the messages is that you're that you're putting out, that your people are receiving it, so that as they're sharing with others, that it's a message that makes people want to come and be a part. So I think focusing on more discussion and not just putting out content.
Wow,
that's amazing. And final question then for you, because you've got so many gems. So we're gonna land with some gems, but for 2 people. So what advice would you give to women in ministry, and what advice would you give to young people in ministry?
So starting with women, I would say, don't try to be something that you're not. So I know that there are a lot of women who, you know, are trying to, how do I say, they're trying to get to the place that they couldn't be before the pandemic. So they're trying to almost like, you know, force like creating this community because, you know, womanist is the new hot thing. Like, if that's not your truth, like, don't feel as though you have to make that your truth. Again, go back to like, who has God called you to serve? Because there's some women that have not been called to serve other women. Like, you don't even really like women. So like, stop that, you know, but really figure out, you know, who have you been called to serve? And like, everything that you do, like, do it with excellence. Like, that doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but do it to the best of your ability. To young people, don't feel as though you have to be like a 80-year-old in a 20-year-old body. Like, you can be young and you can love God. Like, my 16-year-old, he's at a place where like, he doesn't really want to go to church, and I don't force him to go to church. And I know some of y'all like, oh, you got to force him. But the one day we were driving and we had just gotten some Bojangles, and he had a sandwich and some hot fries. And we stopped at a red light, and there was a homeless guy on the street, and he rolls down his window and he says, "Hey man, are you hungry?" And the guy said, "Yeah." And my son gave this man his hot fries. I didn't ask him to, I didn't have to, you know, encourage him to. That came from his heart. And so I think that we've gotten into this whole performative Christianity where you got to come to church and look a certain way. But if your heart isn't in the right place, if you don't see a hungry person and say, I'm not going to give you the least of what I have, but I'm going to give from the best of what I have, just so that you can be okay. I can't change your situation, but for right now, I can make sure that you have some hot French fries. Then what are we doing? And so for young people, don't feel as though you have to be performative. Do it from your heart. Whatever God has called you to do it from your heart. And the rest of your life, it's not going to be easy, but you will have so much peace knowing that you're being who God called you to be.
Amen.
So good.
That's a great place to land.
That's a great place to land.
Listen.
Lakesha, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How can we follow you? Can you give us some social handles, a website, and then also where can we buy your book?
Awesome. So yes, so you can find me on any social media at Lakesha Womack. Tip to any of you who are branding yourself, whenever a new platform comes out, go on and reserve your name. Like, I have my name reserved on pretty much every platform, whether I use it or not, because I don't want other people using my name. So at Lakesha Womack, any platform. For Rethinking Church, you can look up at Rethinking Church. Facebook is where we do the majority of our work. So you're more than welcome to join our community. We post questions, and you know, it gets a little hairy sometimes, but we're not afraid of those difficult conversations. And all of my books are on Amazon, so you know, check out Lakesha Womack on Amazon. And the book that Jennifer is in with us is Ministry That Impacts. Yay, Ministry That Impacts. So there are strategies for you to engage your congregations and community in ministry that actually works. And so just go online and do a quick Google search, and you should find some stuff.
Awesome. Well, hey, to our audience, be sure to let's keep this dialogue going. Reach out to Lakesha, grab the book, grab all of her books, all 3,000 of them on Prophet Sign. But no, seriously, you're a gem. Thank you so much. And to our audience, please share this. Visit the Church Next Show on Instagram, lead net on Instagram as well. And we'll see you next week. We're in this series it's super dope. This is how this joint popped off. Lakesha, listen, we are inviting you back. You always have a place. Even if you just want to drop in, you just let one of us know. But until then, we'll holler at you.
Awesome. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.